council to order. I'm excited just because I didn't dress up today. I got to wear my Team Canada jersey. So I'm enjoying not having to put on a button-down shirt. So, don't think I just was lazy and didn't want to dress up today. I'm trying to get into the Olympic spirit. So, any additions or deletions to the agenda? Hearing none, we will declare the agenda approved. And before we get into announcements, I'll just, we're now not reading the full proclamations, but it is important to recognize that on Monday it's Heritage Day. And for 2018, as part of the Canada 150th celebration, Heritage Day 2018 will recognize Mona Parsons, a member of the Dutch resistance and the only Canadian woman to be imprisoned by the Germans during the Second World War. So thank you for Councillor Thorburn for reminding us that Heritage Day is on Monday. And with that, council will be meeting on Tuesday next week. So happy Heritage Day next week. Any other announcements from members of council? Councillor Frazier.
Yeah, I'll make a few announcements on behalf of the Des Museum. Some upcoming dates. February 25th, Sunday at 2 p.m. we have Murders in Lunenburg County. Peter Oikel will be telling the tale of two infamous murders in Lunenburg County by Peter Mailman in 1873 and James Fleming in 1965. March 18th, Sunday at 3 p.m. we have Friends of Des Museum Society at the 30th anniversary reception. And a couple, the coffee group hosted by the VON, a couple things coming up. February 15th, Lloyd Tancook, Stories of Local Post Offices, Their People and Buildings. February 22nd, Peter Oikel, Getting From There to Here, the role played by foreign Protestants. Okay, so those are a couple of the upcoming events.
Peter, you are busy. Any other announcements? Councillor Thurman.
Well, I think we should announce our birthday tomorrow, 119 years old, and very proud to be alive to see it.
You weren't alive for all of them, though, right?
Most of them.
I know, Councillor McGuinness, but
one less than Bill.
Very close.
All right. Yes, happy birthday to us.
Yes.
That's great. Any other announcements? No. We do have delegation, and I believe, Mr. Oikel, you are here representing the Facade Society.
Yes, Your Worship, Ken wasn't feeling well this evening, so as past chair and vice chair, he asked that I would go through this with you. Cheryl's not aware, though, that I'm going to do 5 murders.
Okay.
1791, the Boutelier brothers, and they murdered 3 people in Lunenburg. That ended in a hanging. There's the Peter Mailman, which ended in a hanging, where he murdered his wife back in Baker's Settlement. Then Havelock Vino, who murdered his father and 3 others over water rights, and that was 1920s. Then we get into William Nicholas Cross in Camperdown, or Italy Cross in 1956, and the James Fleming one, which was 1965, back in Hebville. So I'm going to do the 5 of them. And they all have slightly different endings. So, Your Worship, members of council, staff, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to give you an update on the Bridgewater Facade Society. The year has been an interesting one for the society, and we're also going to be proposing a few changes to you. So it began in 2016. We had a kickoff event, and at that time there was a fair amount of interest by some of the shop owners in Bridgewater. And we were granted $50,000 as part of our memorandum of understanding between the society and the council. And that was to look at facade upgrades, and we have accomplished some of those. It was at that time limited to the King Street Architectural Control Area, and you can think of that from the Veterans Bridge down to Maple Street on King Street. So that was the original memorandum of understanding that we had. Initially, it took us some time to feel our way with this. If I was to share with you that with a number of the files that we dealt with, the one file, I personally logged 44 hours with that file to become completed. That was from beginning to end. And I was happy when it was we finally reached that point. That took several months to do, and that was awarded. Since then, our practice has changed a bit. Nick Brown from the planning department is much more involved from the front end. So rather than having a meeting and looking at an application to say, is it acceptable? Would this be acceptable? Would this siding be acceptable on King Street? Nick has already pre-approved that or looked at it and said, yes, it works, and no, it doesn't. And that really facilitates getting things done. It also means we set a target of a 2-week turnaround from the initial time we receive the application until a decision is made. When we look back to July 2016, we had at that time about 8 people on King Street who expressed interest. Not all of those have applied for or taken the next step. There were others who made phone calls and, you know, if I bought this building, what would it mean, et cetera. So sometimes I was able to refer them back to Nick and make sure before you make any plans, let's make sure it's on side. One of those applications, the company that was providing the resources, the young man dropped by the house one evening and we had a chat, and he said, well, what's holding it up? And he didn't come there for that reason. He came to use my bathroom. He was collecting for the fire department. And I said, well, what's holding it up is that siding is not acceptable for us. And, oh, I can come up with something that would be. So he did work on it, and eventually, Nick, we were able to get that approved. To date, 12 applications have been received and reviewed. And in 2016-17, we distributed 11,992.25. Probably that year, one of the negative impacts was because of the construction going on the main street. Whether some of those people decided not to do something because they didn't know whether they'd be in business the next year, or whether they felt it wasn't worth it to put effort into it and then having to wash it down and clean it down. We don't know. There are different reasons. But they were down. Now, interest since then has grown, and 2017-18 to date, $15,362 has been awarded. So if you look at it, one of the ones that I really enjoyed was the Art Happening building here. Initially, they had proposed 2 colors. The bottom was a very, very, very strong purple, and the top was a lighter color. And after conversation with them, and said, can you come up with a little different scheme? They came up with this one, which is suitable for the building and that area of town. Here, some of this is new facade on here as well. And that was storefront cladding. So some of the projects involve painting, cladding, windows, signage, and lighting. Now, we had a program with Dulux, the paint company. They were willing to provide free paint to people who took part in their contest, and they were going to provide up to three gallons of free paint. And the unfortunate thing was, not a business who was aware of this took advantage of that. Felt very upset by that, because it was an opportunity that if you're buying 8 gallons of paint, you can get 3 free. That's a tremendous saving at a cost of about $70 a gallon. And the owner, Jim, up there, he's a Red Seal painter, so he knows what he's doing. And he was willing to provide expertise and everything for that. And after the first week, when the first deadline passed, they said, we're not going to continue anymore. And this was with Dulux Canada as well. So companies like Benjamin Moore have similar projects. Back in the fall, notice was received, and this came through the deputy mayor and the mayor, would the Facade Society look at changing their memorandum of understanding, and that would allow it for the boundaries. Now, consistent with that, as the chair of the time, I'd received 2 requests from a street in town. Could we apply for it? And we said, well, no, it's not in our original MOU. And and one of those has gone ahead and done some work, the other one hasn't. But they had asked if we were to expand that boundary area, they felt there was an opportunity that people there would take advantage of. So we held discussions on that, and whether it should step beyond the King Street architectural zone. I won't bore you with the details of the discussion, but it is important to recognize that it was unanimously agreed to recommend to extend the boundaries. Now, that doesn't mean that someone's eligible for $20,000, because it's a memorandum of understanding, and to allow it to be accessible to more than one group, it's been limited to 50 cent dollars to a maximum of 5,000. But if you're putting 15,000 in, you're going to get 5 back. That's an incentive to do that. So after a fair amount of discussion, it was felt that it would be important. But I'll just share with you quickly some of the discussion that we had. On the bottom there in January 2018, one was to maintain the status quo. The other was to expand it to involve properties and tenants in parts of the area in consultation with the development officer. And I'll show you that in a moment, that area that we're recommending be expanded to. And then the other one is to expand all in Bridgewater. We just felt we didn't have the expertise right now, the resources, the manpower, person power to make that happen. It's a lot of work involved in managing these, and they're all volunteers. So what does it look like? In words, it's the downtown commercial zone, the LaHave commercial zone, the restricted commercial zone, and properties fronting on Aberdeen Road in the urban commercial zone. So the revised boundaries would include, if we look at it, both King Street and LaHave Street, Aberdeen Street going up, Dufferin Street, and the eastern boundaries of Victoria Road, Empire, and Dominion. Here's the map. The red area here is where it currently exists. This is the Veterans Bridge. It just goes in that area there, Mahone Insurance and the coffee shop, comes down both sides of King Street, bumps up into here, does not include anything on Pleasant, goes down to Maple, just a little bit beyond, and up. So that's the area that currently is in the memorandum of understanding. The area that we're proposing to expand it to, if we go across the bridge, we come down to the Champlain Bridge, we go to the mall, by the theater, across to the pawn shop, up along the plaza, up and behind, up along Davison, up Aberdeen, including the MODL building, down the other side. So that area would be suggested to be included. On this side, the expansion here would be to come over Pleasant Street, catch a piece of it here, go up Dufferin, up here to the driveway going into Lionsden, and then runs across and takes into the call center here, and then comes down, picks up here. I think I got it right, Nick?
Yep.
Okay. So that's the proposed addition. What that opens up are businesses that are here. You know, they're a fair. For example, Swain's up here, the company there. You've got a few others. You have the, what was the Milton Dory building. You have Exit Realty coming down through, and quite a few in through here. I would not anticipate that people like Superstore would be interested in doing that, but this here brings in, comes up to Kempton Appraisals, you have Amos Dental, and then you go right up to the safety training school. So what we're requesting that Town Council, there are a couple of items here. One, if we're to oversee an expanded program, and because that expanded area has the potential of more people coming in and wanting to access it, we're looking to have the fund topped up. I would point out too that part of our cost has been the cost of board insurance, which was recommended to us at that time. So the board of directors has liability insurance to protect them in the event that they do something that someone later disagrees with. We don't have the option with Canada at the Olympics of doing slow motion later to see where we went wrong. I think the issue would be you're being sued, and so there is a protection. And that was purchased through cooperators. 3 different firms, 2 came back, and we were able to negotiate with Danny Carey's firm, and very good. So, right now, there is a current balance of about 22,000 left in there, and that was the original. So if we topped it up, and that would be asking for council to put that in as part of your budget deliberations. So the Bridgewater Facade Society recommends and requests the town council direct staff to work with the town solicitor to revise and execute the MOU with the Facade Society to expand the geographic parameters of the program to also include commercial properties and tenants located in the town's urban commercial zone, LaHave commercial zone, and the restricted commercial zone per the recommendation of the town of Bridgewater's development officer. Number 2, the Facade Society recommends and requests that town council refer its request to grant the Facade Society $50,000 in additional funds to support the expanded facade improvement program to 2018-19, and that would go to your budget deliberations. So, I always hit that wrong button. I can answer if there are some specific questions. I'll try to answer them.
So we're gonna
Yeah, I should know the answer to this, Peter. If I owned a property on King Street and I took advantage of the program 17-18, would I be eligible to take advantage again in 18-19?
Yep.
Really?
Because if it's a different application. So for
For
again,
different work, yeah.
different work. We've also struggled with the issue of what happens if the owner of the building makes application and the tenant makes application. And we've kind of narrowed it down to, if, for example, K&S Fashions, which is she does not own the building. If Starlin wanted to do something, she has to have the permission of the owner anyway. So we would hope that they would have been in conversation. So he doesn't put an application in and she puts one in that are contrary to one another. So things that we've had to kind of work through. But yes, the answer is, and it could be a different building occupying that building. For example, the Rofi building, Jim, I know, had been looking at doing something prior to his decision to close. He chose not to, and I think he knew why he wasn't going to back a year ago. Now someone's going to come in there now. Had we done something with Jim, the new person coming in would be eligible for application. Long answer to your short question.
That's okay.
Other questions? Deputy Mayor Tim.
Peter, a couple for you. You mentioned that those that didn't follow through, you kind of had some ideas about why they didn't progress through.
Yes.
Was that just conjecture, or was it based on you actually followed through with them and asked them why they didn't continue?
Both.
Okay.
Both. In some cases, I know that they were struggling last year when we had the construction,
Okay.
and I suspect that may be one of the reasons why they haven't. Some others have just said, for example, there are people from the Champlain Bridge going north, and they're saying, well, if the town's going to do something in the next 3 or 4 or 5 years, do I want to invest now?
Okay.
And I'm thinking, well, that's your call,
Okay.
but I don't think it'll hurt you.
No comments on the requirements perhaps being too stringent, meaning that the quality or the type of material required would kind of nullify the 50-cent dollar, so to speak, if you know what I mean?
We've tried to work with them to say, this is what is acceptable because there are conditions.
Yeah.
I think, Nick, it's the pre-1920 buildings that were most problematic.
Yes, those are the ones that are subject to the architectural
Yeah.
controls that the program subscribes to.
Right. So I guess my question is, have you looked at that at all, or making it more lenient? I know you're trying to work with them, I guess, but has that come up as an issue, meaning I've got to use this type of material versus if I put another type on, it would cost me half the, you follow my
Yeah.
logic? Yeah, okay. I'm not explaining it
We've
very
had
well.
the discussion, we haven't decided, because we can't, because that's the conditions under
Yeah.
which they operate.
Yeah.
So if you're in the the building that the K&S is in, which was the Ashland store, going back to the 20s. And before that, I mean, that was built after the fire, so it's a pre-1920 existing building.
Right.
So you'd want to maintain that facade as much as possible. But
Sure.
there are materials and windows on the market today that would allow you to be modern, but reflect
Right.
that.
Okay.
Is that
Um,
right, Nick?
Perhaps a question for our Director of Finance, but you've in essence almost tripled the area by just quick scan. If the number of applications suddenly tripled, I guess, how quickly could Town Council, given you're trying to keep within that 2-week decision window, how quickly could Town Council say, wow, you just went through $50,000, could we top up to another 50 if we had to? Is that easy, relatively easy to do, or because it's a society, it's a little trickier? I can't
Well,
remember.
we do it as a grant to the society, so council could approve.
Just another grant.
Approve an unbudgeted grant, but of course it takes
Yeah.
a week or two to work its way through
Okay.
the council process.
Okay.
The
Sorry.
process which we use, that wouldn't be something that on a Thursday afternoon, we'd say, oh, we've completely run out of
Sure,
funds.
sure.
But that would be nice to be able to say that.
Yeah, yeah. Last question, you kind of joked about Lennox Superstore and so on, but are the provisions in the MOU or the granting process that protect us against big corporations sort of leveraging this, so to speak?
Not if they meet the conditions of the application.
Okay,
The process for vetting the application is such that there might be some questions. And I jokingly used Superstore because I know Superstore has a process that they go through. My daughter was involved in that when she worked for Superstore, and I know they have a lengthy process. I don't think that they would be interested if they were doing a $200,000 reno at the front of the store. That Gill and Weston would be concerned about us giving them $5,000.
sure, sure.
If they came and made application, I think we'd vet it in the same way we would any application.
Okay.
If the mall decided, Mr. Levy decided he wanted to do something at the mall, which is what sort of spurred this conversation,
Yep,
we would look at that as well.
okay,
What would that mean? Would it be acceptable? And so,
fair enough.
Other questions?
Just one.
Yes.
At budget deliberation, I think we talked about each year topping it up to $50,000, just so that we would always have that $50,000 there, when we first put that in place. So if you spent 20 this year, it'd be 30 left, we top it up to 50 to start the new year. To go back to the original amount, I believe that's the discussion that had taken place at the time.
I think so, and I think last year the reason we didn't was because there was such a low uptake, but that goes back to your original point, which was because of the construction on King Street, a lot of business owners, and why would they paint their building just to have it covered in dust? So that, I mean, that made sense, but I
Yeah.
believe that was the original
Okay,
plan.
great, thanks.
Councilor McDonald.
So, this program initially, part of the intent was to help revitalize the downtown. So I fully understand the less historic side of the downtown on the other side of the bridge maybe being incorporated into this. But what purpose do you feel going up Dufferin and up Aberdeen serves?
there are some businesses there that, I know two of them that had raised it with me back then, because they would like to have, their buildings looking spiffy as well. And he said, well, if I'm going to put $8,000 into doing this, and I can leverage it, that'd be $4,000 back. It was an incentive. It is viewed as a commercial zone, and it was for
Right.
that reason. So,
it has nothing to do with revitalizing the downtown, it's just because they're commercial?
and that is where the part of the discussion was with the society. If we step beyond the downtown, which was the original intent, why would we do that? And then when we looked at, if we did step beyond, where would we go, where there's a potential that would make the entrance into Bridgewater that much more attractive. So if you look at those areas, you have the highway coming in from Lunenburg,
Right.
we have Mahone Bay, we have off the Route 13, or exit 13, and we have the old highway coming in Bridgewater or Dufferin. So that was sort of the thinking in the end, if I can sort of put it in the simplest of how we felt.
So we had, when we were initially looking at the program, we had talked about it expanding over time and, you know, the potential that it might grow. This seems like a big expansion all at once. Is the society comfortable with how much this is expanding all at once?
Initially, there were a lot of questions. Do we have the personnel, do we have the volunteer time that we can see to make that happen? Changing one of the processes that we use, which is having Nick as a development officer going through that first, make sure that it's compliant with the zone. That was a big step. We'd even toyed with the idea of saying, well, you know, would we hire someone as part of the cost of managing some of the applications? And it wasn't felt right now. So if we had 7 or 8 applications going through next year, each of them maxing out at 5,000, we felt we can handle the 7.
Yes.
So a lot of the area that you're proposing isn't within controlled areas. Do the same materials and requirements and standards still apply to those applicants?
Can I
Is
defer
it-
that to Nick?
So the requirements, you know, to do with cladding and you know, all the
Mhm.
materials and using some of those traditional products, it only applies to properties within, it's either the King Street Architectural Control Area, so that's King
Okay.
Street on both sides from Maple to Victoria, or the Residential Architectural Control Area. But that, and that residential architectural control area does include that Dufferin Street portion, the restricted commercial zone.
Okay.
So Dufferin, King, and Pleasant, yes, for pre-1920 buildings only.
Right, okay.
The other areas, the LaHave Commercial, so LaHave Street, and the Urban Commercial, which is the Aberdeen Road portion, there would be no architectural controls for those properties.
Okay.
Councilor Graves?
Of the 12 properties, applications reviewed, is it just 4 properties that were actually had renovations? Is it just 4?
No, those are just examples.
How many properties in total? Do you know?
Oh, now you have me. Let me think. When we first started, the first application was for the Yoga Room of Essence.
Mhm.
The second application came up, we had 8 in total? Okay, thank you, Nick. One of them was the building that the Johnsons own for the old Bavarian.
Okay.
Another was for the building down the street. Another one was Art Happening, but there are 8 properties that were taken care of. Okay.
I, for one, think this is a great change. I think it would be a nice problem to have if we had a run on a whole bunch of business owners and building owners wanting to put a few $1,000s into their property. You know, it beautifies the town and eventually leads to assessment increases, which does go into increased revenues, which then goes into the services that we offer our citizens. So it would be a nice problem to have.
I think, Your Worship, as you look at Yarmouth's experience with this, once they got things rolling, they couldn't really meet the demand in the end.
And there's their budget not $275,000 or
It's
something like
over
that?
250,
Yeah,
Think, Nick?
for theirs.
Yeah.
So, that's great. Any other questions for Mr. Royko? No? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other delegations to come before council at this time? No? You have before you the minutes of January 8th and January 22nd, regular council meetings. Any questions or comments on those? Nothing? All right, hearing none, we'll declare those approved. We're down to planning items, and we have a public hearing now and final consideration of the request for, to rezone from special commercial to 2-unit residential, and that's on Pearl Street. And so in a public hearing, we have one item on the agenda. Statutory requirements of advertising have all been done for this meeting. So we'll turn it over to Nick Brown, who's representing the planning department, for his overview.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council, good evening. So this is the public hearing for an application proposing rezoning of a special commercial property at 20 Pearl Street to 2-unit residential. The 2-unit residential zone will enable subdivision of 2 side-by-side dwelling units. What that creates is a boundary line that would run along the common vertical wall to create 2 dwelling units on separate lots. The property in question is located, say, at the bottom of Pearl Street, close to the wild carding mill, and just before where the Centennial Trail intersects with Pearl Street. This slide shows the current zoning and future land use designation for the property. The zoning map on my left shows the special commercial C8 zone where the star is. That's the current zoning for the subject property. The map on my right, future land use map, shows the designation for the property. The future land use map of the municipal planning strategy designates that property as low-density residential. A little background, the area, the Sebastopol area, has a long history of industrial and residential uses. Current building was actually built as a church, but the Horton Insurance operated the building from 1980 to 2015. When that use was discontinued. So the proposal, the application, is to convert the former commercial building into 2 dwelling units on separate lots, and that's via that subdivision that the 2-unit residential zone allows along the common vertical wall. So that'd be the wall in the middle that separates the 2 units. The municipal planning strategy policies, they support this rezoning. It's how the special commercial zone is set up. It relates back to the future land use map designation, and as low density residential, it's compatible. A single unit or 2 units compatible with traditional single unit neighborhoods. Therefore, it also, well, I shouldn't say therefore, it also provides density without disrupting the current neighborhood. And the 2-unit, the semi-detached layout is an efficient use of town services and materials. The current zone, special commercial zone, allows for 2-unit dwellings as of right and an expansion of authorized residential uses. It just doesn't allow for the subdivision to create semi-detached housing. The intent of the special commercial zone is that when a discontinued commercial, that a very specific commercial use is discontinued, that the property is rezoned in accordance with the future land use map and designation. The 2-unit residential zone enables that subdivision, and it is one of the reserve zones in the low-density residential designation. Single-unit residential R1 and 2-unit residential R2 are the reserve zones in the low-density designation of the future land use map. Staff held a public participation meeting on December 6th. There were a few adjacent property owners in attendance. Overall, there was support for the project. A few concerns were raised about parking and traffic, increased traffic on Pearl Street, and access to the Centennial Trail. I firmly believe that all questions were answered, and those residents were satisfied that night. The proposed text amendment that goes along with this application is very simply crossing out 20 Pearl Street from Table T, and that's part of the land use bylaw. That's a table that lists all the special commercial uses in town. And the proposed map amendment component to this application is, well, as you see, rezoning from special commercial to 2-unit residential R2. Therefore, therefore, staff recommend the town council give second and final consideration of the proposed map and text amendments of the land use bylaw as contained in Appendix A of your report. So, just a few next steps, if I may. Upon approval, a notice of approval would be published in the local paper. There's a 14-day appeal period. Copy of the amendments are sent to the province, and then the amendments become effective when that 14-day appeal period has lapsed, if no appeal has been filed. And I believe with that, can I take questions now, or is that coming later? Sorry.
Apparently I clued into this. Questions come at the end, but,
Right.
so is there a presentation by the developer?
I don't mind speaking on a presentation.
No, if you'd like to speak, that's fine.
I was born in Bridgewater. My brother and I are looking to invest in the town that we were raised in, so it's nice to see the locals around us supporting us. So this is my first town hall meeting, and not much to say other than we're looking to continue to invest, and we're looking for support in the rezoning to R2. Under C8, we can do what we would like to do with it, but we feel that the town of Bridgewater would rather have 2 dedicated homeowners than maybe potentially 2 renters under the CA classification, which is why we are pushing for the R2 zoning.
Great. Thank you. Any members of the public making any comment? I don't see any. Closing remarks by the chairman. That's me. I had all my questions answered when we had the first go around with this. I think any development that's complementary in terms of use is good. That's what we want to see. I like to see young developers come back to town and invest in their home community. That's great. So I'm looking forward to this moving forward. Are there any questions from members of council?
Ready for the motion?
I'm ready for the motion, yes.
Okay. I would move that town council for the town of Bridgewater give second and final consideration to the proposed map and text amendments of the land use bylaw as contained in Appendix A, document 17-185B.
Seconder, please. Councilor McDonald. Sorry, Mr. McGinnis, you're too slow. Any further discussion?
Question?
Any questions being called? All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. And public hearing is adjourned. Congratulations.
Nice looking building.
Good luck. Yes, looking forward to it. Our next planning item is the application for rezoning from special commercial C8 to downtown residential R4 and development agreement at 210 York Street. Mr. Brown, you're
Thank you.
up again.
No presentation this time. Preliminary report for property at 210 York Street. The proposal is to convert the former Robert Brown's Electronics to an office use. The property is located just south of the corner of Victoria Road and York Street, so it's on York Street just south of Victoria Road. There are 2 applications that need to be approved for this to enable the conversion to an office use. The first is a rezoning application from special commercial to downtown residential. So like Pearl Street, the property is currently zoned special commercial. It's designated medium density residential in the future land use map. The 2 zones that fit under the medium density residential designation are downtown residential and medium density residential. Downtown residential is the predominant zone in the area. The municipal planning strategy supports rezoning to downtown residential. The second part to this process, by way of a second application, is a proposal to enter into a development agreement in the downtown residential zone to enable an office use. So going from commercial to a residential zone to enable an office use. The special commercial zone is very specific in the commercial uses that it permits. The designation requires that the rezoning go to downtown residential. By development agreement, you can do offices in the downtown residential zone. Those offices can be up to 400 square meters, just over 4,000 square feet in gross floor area. And there are a few other criteria that the application has to meet. One of which, the most important, is that the area be characterized by a well-established non-residential component. In this case, with the Brookside Cemetery and Veterans Memorial Park just north of the Victoria Road, York Street intersection, it's institutionally zoned, and there's a park zone there as well with Veterans Memorial Park. The old Mackenzie Bus Lines Garage site is institutionally zoned, and Damone's Monuments, which is just east on Victoria Road, is special commercial. So there is a well-defined non-residential component in the area. So as it pertains to the development agreement application, staff believe that the criteria are being met to enable this to be brought forward. So there's two applications running together concurrently to enable this office use. And with that said, staff recommend that council refer this application to a public participation meeting to be scheduled on February 21st at 6 p.m. in these council chambers. Questions?
Questions? Councilor Thurman first.
We seem to be having quite a few applications for rezoning over time, and it seems to take a long time. It seems like there's too bad we couldn't have some sort to shorten the process, because it really does. If you plan to do something, the time to jump through all the hoops. The poor old developer, it's quite a lengthy time trying to complete the project. But I guess there's nothing we can do to shorten the process.
We try to move the process along as quickly as we can. There are statutory requirements that are handed to us. The requirement to do the first and second readings, the public participation meeting up front. So by way of that, and having to, of course, come back to council all 3 times, it lengthens the process out. We can sometimes get it completed at 3 months, but we typically tell people, expect 4 months or so to complete an application. These do seem, and they are, fairly straightforward rezoning applications, especially when concerning the special commercial zone, because the intention there is that once that specific commercial use is discontinued, that it reverts to residential. And we can take care of that through a process, a planning document review process, which of course we went through, 4 or 5 years ago now. And so we will be coming up upon that again, and we can do some of those rezonings during that time, especially with the special commercial zone. But yeah, the applications take time.
Okay, thanks, Nick.
Councilor McGinnis.
A simple question I don't know the answer to, you people probably all do. What is downtown residential?
It's a good question. Downtown residential is it's a residential zone that you'll find just to the west of the historic downtown core. And what it has in it are a bunch of mostly residential properties. There are a few offices, but predominantly residential properties that are older structures. So they're a lot of times they were these large grand homes that have been converted to 2, 3, and 4 units. So as opposed to the single unit residential or even the 2 unit residential zones, which allow 1 and 2 units respectively, The downtown residential zone allows up to 4 units, so it allows for those conversions of the older homes. And we used to call it, I think just another medium density residential zone, but it took on the name downtown residential because of its proximity to downtown and the more historic nature of the area.
Nick, relating to that, is there any parking requirement? Parking space requirement?
So the land use bylaw has a parking requirement for 1 space for every 322 square feet of gross floor area.
Okay.
It's a smaller building. I would suspect, without actually looking at the site plan, or I don't have it in front of me, 2, maybe 3 parking spaces would be required if the land use bylaw was being used in a stringent way. Through the development agreement process, those types of requirements can be varied. So if the applicant wants only 2 parking spaces, staff may recommend favorably.
I guess my concern is you're just coming out of a school zone there. That street is already quite busy with parked cars, at least during the school time period and so on, and adding a massage therapist's office, which I assume, is it just 1, or do we know how many practicing? But it doesn't matter, I guess. But you could up the number of vehicles on that street and create perhaps some safety concerns and or parking issues, I guess.
Yeah, and staff will definitely take that into
Okay.
consideration. Being that this is the sort of preliminary report, we don't have the site plan in front of us, but
Okay.
the intention of the new owners of this property is to create some off-street parking. So
Okay.
there is some space just to the south of the existing building where you can come off-street, and they should get, well, they could possibly get 3 or 4 parking spaces in that area, whether they want that many or not. We would evaluate that with the gross floor area. It's a smaller building, so it can't accommodate that much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Any further questions? Someone prepared to make a motion? Councilor Bergier?
I'll make your motion, Your Worship, that Town Council for the Town of Bridgewater refer the matter of the requested rezoning from special commercial C8 to downtown residential R4 and a development agreement for 210 York Street as contained in document 18-018 to staff to undertake a public participation meeting on Wednesday, February 21st at 6 p.m.
Seconder? Councilor McDonald? Any further discussion?
Question.
Hearing none, all those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're down to correspondence for information. The first item there is Municipal Joint Service Board Recreation Study. Just for the public's information, at the January 24th meeting of the Municipal Joint Service Board, the motion was made and passed that the MJSB develop a scope of work in conjunction with the municipal recreation staff to model the regional recreation infrastructure in Lunenburg County, with the scope to include identification of regional recreation assets, quantification of capacity and utilization of each asset, summary of financial performance and projected remaining life of each asset, and identification of potential regional recreational infrastructure gaps. All that to say, we had money left over from our municipal affairs to do a recreation study when we were looking at joint services of recreation. So when that didn't go forward, just over a year ago, I would say, that kind of stalled, that money was still available, and it was put forward, I believe, by our CIO that perhaps we use that money to do that inventory. We had the presentation for HB Studios, for example. We have a number of recreational assets around the county that we either own or don't own or fund. And so this is going to put all those together to tell us what we have. And I had a discussion today with a member of council from MODL, and the question was asked, well, how much life is in the Lunenburg Arena, for example? I don't know the answer. If it's 5 years, does that have an impact on the LCLC, for example? If it's 25 years, then, does that mean we're not gonna bother looking at a second rink in the next 25 years? All these questions that we can't answer until we have that, so, that, I'm pleased to say, was passed at the NJSB, and so it will be going forward, and information will be coming back. To be clear, this is not to recommend a change in recreation services, it's just to give us some data in order to make better decisions, which is what we want to do. Deputy Mayor Tanner.
Do we have a timeline for release of that RFP? We've had some experiences at the Joint Services Board with things taking exorbitantly too long to reach conclusion, so I'm just curious if we've talked about that yet.
My expectations, through the mayor to council, my expectation would be, that would be something we'd see done by the fall. We need to get together, finalize the scope, and issue the RFP. So when it moved forward, it was my anticipation then, but, so I think that's what we'd be looking at.
That seems like a long time, no?
I don't.
I thought you were gonna say like Friday, and you said fall instead. Friday.
Well, so we need to come together with the scope, issue the
Right.
RFP. An RFP would be on market for about a month, and let them do the work, so.
So you're saying it's gonna, the whole thing's gonna be done by the fall? Or we're
Yes.
going to-
Oh, okay.
I thought you
I
said
thought
we were
it was
going to
RFP.
RFP
No.
in the fall.
No, done.
Sorry.
Oh, okay, that's
All right.
I'm happier.
Okay. Was that your question?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. It wasn't just me.
No, sorry.
That's okay.
So-
Councilor Graves.
So the town of Lunenburg and Chester are not part of the Municipal Joint Services Board. Are they going to be included in the study?
So what the question is on regional recreation infrastructure, so regional assets, yes. And that, so we're not getting to the fine grain of the small little things, so big things that would have that impact, like the Lunenburg Arena would be included.
And everybody's agreed, for the most part?
The MJSB has.
Okay.
It doesn't,
We don't need the others to.
yeah.
Okay.
It's
good point.
more for our information. They may want that information.
Yeah.
It's to their
Good data.
benefit as well. but
Okay.
It's more, we need to know what we have before we make any more decisions.
Agree.
Any other questions? So we'll, I'm glad that that's gonna be done by the fall. That's good. The next item there is Federation of Canadian Municipalities, Partners for Climate Protection Program Achievement Milestone. I was pleased when I was going to meet with the two ministers last week that the day before I arrived, I was able to be with Leon as the town received this award. So these milestones, I'm gonna just explain how they work. So the first milestone is you have to create a greenhouse gas emissions inventory and forecast. So we did that. We got that award last year or a couple of years ago. Setting an emissions reduction target, we did that one. So this was developing a local action plan and implementing the local action plan or set out a set of activities. So of course, that's the Energized Bridgewater Plan. So this is another feather in our cap, if you will. The big takeaway for me is they had each municipality that was getting their awards, there was 5 of them, had little booths set up. And there was Bridgewater at the end. Everyone was around Bridgewater's. And all I could hear was people talking about the Energized Bridgewater Plan. And when I met with the two ministers last week, I conveyed to them that it is not an exaggeration to say that almost every municipality is watching how the federal government and the provincial government reacts to our plan, because they understand that they can pick up our plan, put it in their community, and start to work towards that 80% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions that we're proposing. And while I'm talking about that, I'll just fill council in and the public in that Leon and I then met with Mr. Baines and Minister Sohi. So that's infrastructure is Minister Sohi, and Mr. Baines is economic development and innovation, I believe. Not only did they walk into the room with the plan in hand, their questions, they'd obviously read it based on the questions that they had asked. They were visibly excited by the prospects of this plan going forward. And the two of them were actively engaged with each other, trying to find a path forward in terms of helping us find funding so that we can move this ahead And I know we're moving ahead whether we get funding from the feds or not, because it's the right thing to do and we want to hit these targets. But the more money we're able to leverage from other levels of government, the more we can do in a quicker amount of time, which means there's more data for us to go to other communities, or the federal government to go to other communities and say, you need to implement this plan in Toronto or Calgary or Kentville. So it was quite something, and Leon was great in his presentation, and when I return tomorrow for another reason, they're hoping to have 2 more ministers sit in. They felt environment should for sure hear this presentation.
Really?
So it's very well received, and we should be very proud as a town, and this council and the previous council. What started with the sustainability plan 10 years ago, we worked out that the day we presented to the ministers was Leon's 10th anniversary with the town of Bridgewater. That was to the day.
Oh, my God.
So it started with that plan, and has ended with Energized Bridgewater. We should be very pleased as a community with that. So, well done to us. Happy birthday. Any questions on that? Excellent. Okay, nothing for correspondence for action. Reports and recommendation, we have the third quarter financial report. Mrs. Kaiser, do you have,
I didn't really prepare a presentation. I mean,
just take questions?
Yeah, surplus we're projecting at this point is 132,600, but a lot can change, of course. Read snow in the next few months. We're projecting a surplus in snow right now, but
I hope so.
yeah.
Not a surplus in snow, but a surplus in our snow removal budget.
Right, exactly. But I'd be happy to answer your questions.
Councilor McGinnis.
Yeah, 132 in operating, but there's also a surplus in the capital.
Yeah, I
Of
think it's
about
about
424?
425, yeah.
Is that pretty firm, or is that subject to change?
I expect there could be some changes, but a lot of the projects are complete,
Yeah.
so those ones are known
Yeah, so
quantities.
it's pretty
There are
close.
several projects that, the fire truck, for example, is coming in quite a bit under budget.
Yeah. Okay.
We may have to put that money into paving.
Hey,
Some of the streets today, we need them.
That's this warm weather, then cold weather, then warm weather, and cold weather is.
drive through New Lines.
Yes. Well, pick a town.
Pick any town.
Yeah. Any other questions? Councilor Frazier.
Question. With regards to the section on administration, with the BDA transition costs, have we finalized the expenses there from the BDA, or are they still?
There will be some additional costs because there's going to be an audit
Okay.
done, like a final audit, and there'll be some costs associated with wrapping up the society, and the town will have to bear those. Now, we did get the rest of the money from the BDA, so that will more than cover
Okay.
what we need to spend.
So we're on the plus. Yes.
Any other
All
questions?
good. All good.
All good. Wow. Good job. Thank you. Our next item is the recommendation of the Heritage Advisory Committee, citizen appointee. Someone prepared to make that motion?
I'll make a
Councilor
motion.
Durbin? Thank you.
I move that Town Council of the Town of Bridgewater endorse the recommendation of the Heritage Advisory Committee and appoint Dan Monahan to the Heritage Advisory Committee for a 3-year term.
Have a seconder, please. Councilor Frazier, any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Those opposed?
Volunteers.
Motion is carried.
That-
Recommendation of the Director of, oh, sorry, did you?
That gives us a full body on that committee, first time in 5 years.
Good.
We're full.
Good, thank you. Recommendation of the Director of Parks, Recreation, and Culture, Canada and LaHave Committee Citizen Appointment. Someone prepared to make, Councilor Frazier?
Yes, I'll make the motion that Town Council for the Town of Bridgewater approve the appointment of Peter Oikle and Frank Benben as a resident of Lunenburg County members of the Canada Day on the LaHave Committee, effective immediately, each for a 3-year term.
Have a seconder, please. Deputy Mayor Taylor. All those in favor? Those opposed? The motion is carried. First reading the amendment to Chapter 200 Comprehensive Parking Bylaw. And this is strictly to remove the parking levy, is it not? That we
decided
I
last year.
decided last year at budget time, so this is to kind of put the wheels in motion to finalize that.
Well, I'll wait for the motion.
Okay, someone prepared to put the motion on the floor? Council Frazier?
Yes, that town council for the town of Bridgewater endorse the intent of the amended comprehensive parking bylaw, chapter 200, as per document 18-023, and proceed to second reading of the bylaw at a council meeting to be held on March 12th, 2018, and authorize staff to publish all public notices pursuant to section 168 of the Municipal Government Act.
Seconder, please. Deputy Mayor Tanner. Discussion. Councilor McGinnis.
There are two properties included in that we don't own. The O'Neill parking lot and the town center parking lot. And we're gonna meter both those parking lots? That's a question.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, are we committed to do so? We don't own them.
Through the mayor to the council, we lease them.
Don.
The kiosks have been purchased, have they not? For
Pardon
those
me?
the kiosks have been purchased for those parking lots, have they not?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
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 So that's how we'll collect the money.
But to your point, we're allowed to do that because not only do we lease them, but we do all the maintenance, all the repairs. We
I guess my next question would be, the parking infrastructure we're putting in there is movable?
yes.
What if they do not renew the lease?
Yes, I believe that question, someone asked that about
Yeah.
the downtown, if we put them on the parkade, can we move them if we do repairs? So they are movable.
Okay, they are movable.
Yeah.
Okay.
Councilor Graves.
So just in regards to the parking lot that's on the south side of Pejunuska Park, the Co's, what's considered the Co's parking lot, it's not mentioned in here, yet it is part of the parking. It also will have meters, as I understand it, which will be installed or taken from other parts. So should it be included in the, it's not designated. It is a parking lot, 10 spaces.
So this is respect to the levy.
So it was probably not included in the levy in the first.
What's it?
It's ours.
Oh, it's, okay. So that was apparently in the metered parking zone that was approved last summer. So
Okay.
that's why it's excluded here.
Just the meter. Okay. Doesn't say it.
Councilor McGinnis.
There's not a good answer to this question, but I'll ask it anyway. I'll use the O'Neill parking lot as an example. We lease, and I don't know what we pay for that a year, but it may be, what, $5,000? I don't know. Are we gonna ensure that the rates that we charge in the meters on that parking lot is at least enough to cover the lease that we're paying?
I don't think we would have an answer to that question until we start seeing the use. We've never metered that parking lot before, so I don't know. We wouldn't have a measurable set of data until we have kind of gone through this process.
And that question applies to the town center as well. You see, I don't think we should be involved in those two parking lots. We don't own the land, we don't own, why are we involved?
So through the mayor to council, you actually still retain the opportunity to make that decision separate of this bylaw. In fact, on the O'Neill parking lot, we'll be coming to council with respect to the lease in short order because the lease needs to be updated or dealt with. So we'll be seeking direction, and council could choose at either time in either of those lots to stop leasing that, stop doing parking. So you're not, this repeal of the levy does not make you have to have those lots. That's your decision.
I'm just a little concerned we're gonna buy some parking infrastructure that we're not gonna use down the road.
We've already bought it. I believe it arrives in end of March. But we can move it,
Yes.
move it around. We'll put it in front of your house.
Yeah, why not?
Any other questions?
No.
No? Hearing none, there's a motion on the floor, prepared for the question to be called.
question.
Okay, question's been called. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. First reading of amendment to Chapter 191, Protection from Secondhand Smoke Bylaw. So in short, this is basically to add cannabis into the protection from secondhand smoke. Someone prepared to put that motion on the floor? Mayor Tanner?
I move that town council for the town of Bridgewater endorse the intent of the amended chapter 191 protection from secondhand smoke as per document 18-025 and proceed to second reading of the bylaw at a town council meeting to be held on, March 12th, 2018, and authorize staff to publish all public notices pursuant to section 168 of the Municipal Government Act.
Have a seconder, please. Councillor Graves.
You were expecting it this time.
Any debate, any discussion?
Has
Mayor?
our bylaw officer been officially hired and are they active? Do we know?
Is he hired? If he's not hired, he's hired imminently.
Okay.
I think it's 5th of March, isn't it? I remember
have the
somewhere
interviews.
somewhere.
Yeah,
Yes.
I think they've chosen their.
I think they've
their
chosen
person.
5th of March they start.
Yeah,
5th of March? Okay, yeah. Thanks.
Any further questions? Hearing none. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Business arising unfinished business. We had the beach volleyball presentation a few weeks back, which was well done. And as we just noted, we're gonna do a recreation infrastructure study. So there's a recommendation to kind of put that into that study for future consideration. And someone prepared to make that motion. Councillor Graves.
Graves, fine.
I move that town council for the town of Bridgewater refer the request for beach volleyball courts to the Regional Recreation Infrastructure Model Project for future priority consideration by council.
Seconder, Councillor Thorburn. Any discussion? Deputy Mayor Tanner?
So I hadn't understood that the study would include future modeling, so to speak. I had understood it would just include a review of what we've currently got and how, where it is, how it exists, what its lifespan is, et cetera. So I just, I'm fine with this. I just want to make sure that it truly does make the scope of the RFP.
Sure. Through the mayor to council, reason staff were recommending to defer it to then is because we want to make sure that the right priorities are recommended to council for these next purchases. Things such as the splash pad have come up.
Okay.
There's a number of really good ideas, and, you know, we'll want to seek external funding as well. We want to make sure that we line those up with council's priorities.
I'm not sure I got an answer to my question.
Well, so we need to know what we
And I've been
need.
up for a while, so
Yes.
sorry.
So we're recommending that out of that, we'll better understand what our priorities are and be able to make a recommendation to you, what we should be doing
Okay.
first and next.
Okay.
But this in no sense is any approval of this project or any other future project.
No.
Just because it's being rated in a priority.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah. Councillor Thorburn.
I mean, we see this as a project that should go there. Probably the other units, when you talk to them, may have some other project that they have on the horizon that might want to be part of the process as well. So whatever we're planning to do, we can make some sort of a plan to get it done.
Well, and the key to this is if we get the presentation for beach volleyball courts and think, you know what, this would be probably a pretty good thing, let's say at Shepherd's Landing. And MODL is sitting there going, you know, we're gonna put 4 beach volleyball courts down at one of our new parks that are on the waterfront.
Yeah.
Well, we don't wanna go down the road again of replicating and duplicating the services.
Yeah.
So at least we'd have the information to say, oh, are you gonna do it? Are we gonna do it? Are we each gonna do one? Or we won't? So I think there's value in adding it so that our projects as well as their projects are in front of both councils. I think it's important, especially because we do have a recreation facility that we're so tightly partnered with them. I think it's important for everyone to know what everyone else has got coming.
Yeah.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Library lighting, this one should make a few people happy.
Absolutely.
Long overdue,
Doing nothing for me.
and
Very little for me.
quite a bit under the dollar figure that was presented to the LCLC board. So we want to put the motion on the floor and then we can discuss it?
Sure. I move that town council for the town of Bridgewater approve the unbudgeted expenditure of $1,463.60 plus an net HST for a total of $1,526.33. I think I'm tired too. To the Lunenburg County Lifestyle Center to remedy the lighting configuration deficiencies at the Margaret Henniker Library.
Have a seconder, please. Councillor Frazier, discussion.
Yeah, it's about time. Wow.
So, this has been debated back and forth at the LCLC board. Of course, as you know, the town of Bridgewater contributes 100% to the library. Our partner contributes 0% to the library. So that doesn't help. This debate goes all the way back to when the facility was built, somebody signed off on the lighting, rightly or wrongly. And we can't undo that because someone signed off on the lighting. But if you go to the back of the library on that left-hand side, you cannot see the books on the shelf. So there's no debate on the fact that there's a lighting issue. The debate is who pays for the lighting. And when it came to the LCLC board, I believe the price we were given was $8,000. So that was not gonna go anywhere. So that's why it's before this council. The library, at least for now, seems to be our responsibility. Personally, I disagree with that. I think we should be partners in the facility, and that's 100% of the facility, but that's something we'll have to, I think, manage as we go forward. But for now, we have a lighting problem, then for me, I don't see another path forward to remedy the lighting, at least in the short term. Councilor McGinnis.
Is this work being done in-house?
I believe we're doing
No, there's, the contractor is doing it for them.
but we scoped it out for them though, right? Wasn't it that we used our staff to?
Well, we have a staff that has a company that they hired so he's not working for us when he does this.
Okay.
I'm just bitter about the whole LCLC. Not, wonderful facility. The problem I'm having is we've had problem with the humidification system in the rink. We still got another problem. We've had a lot of issues there from day one that the original contractor or designer have been let off the hook as far as I'm concerned. I mean, the building's not 5 years old, and we're doing things that should be covered. These things happened a year after it opened, some of these things. And I just think it's a little bit ridiculous that we don't have some recourse against the builders or the designers or someone on these things, and they're costing us, several $100,000. Now, this is a very small one, but again, it's another, it's another issue, and there'll be more. And I just wonder when it's gonna stop.
You'll get no argument from me on that one. Councilor McDonald.
The contractor who is doing the job, when they scoped out the work or kind of gave an estimate, they were not doing that on behalf of the town of Bridgewater, were they? Okay.
Any more questions?
But I think I'm in Councilor McGinnis's boat in the sense that I fully understand the history of this. I struggle why the town of Bridgewater is the one to be paying for this. I understand the South Shore Regional Library also had a surplus this last little while, and I guess I understand the terms of the lease, but I struggle with this one, that's for sure, especially when we do have a partner in that facility that has no financial burden with regard to this library, so.
Councilor Graves, then Councilor Thorburn.
But at the same time, there's been an awful lot of customer complaints from citizens that are just frustrated with the fact that it takes 3 years to put lights on in a small little corner of the library. And I don't dispute what everybody has said, but at the same time, putting the taxpayer first or the customer first, it's the right thing to do. And $1,400 is not a lot of money.
Councilor Thorburn.
Well, it really is a safety issue, and for that I will support it. But I just hope it doesn't increase our cost as part of the maintenance budget to make us pay more for maintenance because we're doing this.
And I absolutely do not disagree with Councilor Graves, but I think if you look at the customer base and who's using that library, I think you'd very quickly understand,
Yep.
and I know you're aware,
Yep.
where that customer base resides and the percentage of people that are using it, and that's what's unfair about this, in my opinion.
if this was day one and we had
Right.
just opened it up and realized, and we had some time to debate this, I wouldn't be supporting the motion. I would be going back to our partner, going back to the contractor, going back to the library to say someone other than us has to keep, like someone else has to pay for this. It can't always come back to us, but we are 4 years into the building being open. This problem has been there since day one. It's been bounced back and forth. My understanding is almost from day one. And I'm only supporting this motion because I feel like if we don't pass this, we're gonna be another 4 years trying to get someone to cover $750 of our $1,500 bill. And it is a shame.
Yeah.
Now, I will say, we're hoping to, work with our partner and maybe forge some new agreements, but I don't wanna wait 4 more years, so then that's just for me, but I know we're all frustrated for a whole bunch of reasons, but.
Question.
Jennifer had her hand up first.
All right,
Sorry,
just a
Councilor
really
McDonald.
quick comment in that I think we have to recognize that there's, Social Public Libraries is also a partner in this. And you're right, they do have a history of surpluses and have stood pretty strong on a light as well. So there are lots of people who really should be taking responsibility, and we end up paying on a fairly regular basis. So hopefully we can start to change that story going forward.
And perhaps it would be worth having Mr. Myers, right, is it
Right.
still? We don't get a library update from him. I think we had it once in 2010 or something like that. So maybe it would be worth, like we do have the school board come in, have the library come in and just give us an update on users, and also we can start having that discussion.
Not to flog this, because I will be supporting the motion. It has to be done. What bothers me about the library is the town of Bridgewater paid for the construction of the regional offices. The town of Bridgewater paid for those offices. In addition to the library, we pay for those offices. They pay rent. We don't get it. The overall LCLC gets it. Now, I don't know, any business courses or any logic that I can come up with, that is just plain wrong. We pay for that. Now, I know we don't pay rent for the basic library, but the regional offices, okay, that we paid to build, it was our bill. Why, I have no idea, but we did, and they pay rent, and we don't get it. The LCLC gets it. Makes no sense to me. So, this is the reason why I get frustrated with the library.
We get frustrated on this topic, whether
Yeah.
it's.
Every time
Should
that
never
comes
bring it
up. Yeah.
No, we won't bring it up again. Let's deal with this, then we won't bring it up again. Question's being called. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. We don't have to talk about library lighting anymore.
Perfect.
New business, FCM, annual conference and trade show is at the end of May, beginning of June,
Yep.
in Halifax, at the new Nova Center, is that what it's called? Nova Center? I'm looking at Deputy Mayor Tanner, because I think.
Yes.
They call it Nova
Yeah,
Center? Okay.
sorry.
Okay. Trying to keep you awake. So we, in the past, I don't know how the previous council handled it, but how we did it before was, when it's in your own backyard, we try to send as many people as possible, and then, of course, the further you go west, the fewer people you want to send for cost reasons, but it is in our own backyard. Who is interested in going this year? So Councillor Graves, Councillor McDonald, Councillor Frazier? No. And then I'd like to add my name to the list, but I'm not gonna register until I sort out whether Michelin's sending one of us to the Moving On Festival and then, or conference, and then how that, who's gonna go and what the cost is, and then, so I won't spend any money until I know that, but I just wanna make sure that we don't have to come back and deal with that, if that's okay. So that's 4 of us. So is someone prepared to make a motion to appoint Councillor Vergier, Councillor McDonald, Councillor Graves, and myself?
So moved.
Good enough for you? Seconder? Second by Councilor McGinnis. Any further discussion?
Reasonable expenses.
Reasonable expenses. I booked my hotel room 8 months ago to get the cheapest rate possible. I'll cancel if I need to. All right, questions being called. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. There are no sundry items. We have an in-camera meeting on personnel next door. So motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Mayor Tanner, second by Councilor Giroux. We are adjourned. Thank you.